Check, check. Is this thing on? Is this thing on? Is this thing on? Hello? Mic check. Mic check. I'm not sure whether you can hear me or not. Is there anybody actually listening to this stream? How about this mic? Is this mic on? Trying to figure out here which, if any, of these microphones is on. Unmute. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are somehow listening to me and I cannot tell that you are on, I apologize. This is the very first live podcast of Ask the Ascended Master. This is kind of something like an advice show, except it's not advice we're dishing out here in the sense of, you're solving your life problems. This is about philosophy, religion, world religions, Christianity. We'll touch a little bit on the paranormal. We're not going to spend too much time on it because I don't see the value in it. Once you catch the trick, it's not all that interesting. Well, it looks like we are on, and I'm using ambient noise reduction. Very good. And what about my output? Headphones. They are also on. Sweet. So it looks like you are hearing me. And so I'm just going to go ahead with this broadcast. I don't need two microphones pointed at my face. So you can. Nope, wrong one. You can find me over on Medium. You can find me over on Quora. You can ask me your questions using the Quora function directly. Some people have been shooting me questions over there, asking for my personal opinion on various things. You can certainly do that. Some of these questions have been pulled through the Quora platform, and some of them are specifically directed at myself. Some of them have been directed in general to the community. I have not kept track of which. I don't see the point, but just know some of them are directed to me personally, and some of them are not. For transparency's sake, over on Medium, certainly anything that you ask me about a subject that I have posted on over there, I reserve the right to, from this point on, use that question in this live stream, and answer the same as I would answer over there publicly. You may also shoot me an email. That does not mean that if you contact me and just start talking to me that I'm necessarily going to reveal your personal stuff live on broadcast. I would not do that. This is general topical questions, and I would not reveal personally identifiable information about any individual while I was going about this. That is not the goal. We're not trying to create a bunch of that kind of controversy. However, there will be controversial subjects of necessity because philosophy generates controversy. If it didn't do so, it wouldn't work as a subject. Again, the philosophy is something that is only happening as long as individuals are engaged in a healthy and robust debate, and we certainly want to encourage a healthy and robust debate. So if you are joining me over on YouTube and you would like to say something, you can enter it into the chat. and I did not do so before this thing got started. I was intending to do so. You can find me over on Patreon. I am AM Harkey the Sender, and I'm just going to type that into the box so that you can find me more readily. AM Harkey the Sender. You can find me on Patreon. If you would like to support the effort right now, that is the best way to do so. Of course, we are working toward 501c3 nonprofit status at this time. That is the goal. Uh, we have a founding board that is a real board. It is not a pretend board in my head that has been working for a couple of years toward these goals. Um, Believe it or not, this takes quite a lot of work in terms of drawing up documents, getting people to read the documents, communicating about the documents, asking the questions, um, contending with the same sorts of questions that other people would have as they are approaching the materials, and draft after draft after draft until we get to something that most people would find reasonable at first gloss, or we hope so anyway. That document that I'm referring to is, of course, the Tenets of Faith, which is included in the Articles of Incorporation of a 501c3 religious nonprofit. That is part of what makes it different from other types of nonprofits, is that it will tend to include this portion if it is a church organization. All right. Having said all of that, we are now going to dive into the material that I have prepared. Hi, and welcome to the show. I am AM Harkey the Sender, answering your questions on topics ranging from transhumanist philosophy to religion to the so called paranormal. I am the first known female to complete an ascension since Middle Ages Europe. I am most familiar with Western philosophy, although I have also made the obligatory foray into Eastern thought. This is the first broadcast of Ask the Ascended Master. I have put this thing together at the suggestion of one of my board members. This is supplemental to other activities in religious education that are ongoing and a part of my work with New Earth Philosophical School. Our goal is to promote spiritual transhumanism, what we are calling Christianity 3.0. We consider this to be an update. Where did my thing go? I don't have a teleprompter. This is low tech. Definitely low tech. Open windows. As long as I'm looking at my teleprompter, I can't see what you're saying. Maybe that's a good thing. We'll just keep going here. Christianity 3.0. We consider this to be an update to Christian thought, just to make that clear. No, we are not trying to outdo or outshine Christ in any way. Nor was anyone who ever participated in Ascension trying to outshine or outdo anyone else. It doesn't work that way. If that's what you think you are doing it wrong, and you will not get good results. Um, we acknowledge that Christianity has taken a wrong turn, especially here in the US, and that it is not at present meeting the needs of the public. Obviously, if the public is choosing not to participate in some organization, the market has determined what will be the next steps. We will have to hold a reformation if we want to bring about any sort of sustained revival. Now, why might we want one? Our forefathers have put in quite a lot of sweat and gold building the infrastructure of the church in the US, and by that I mean the actual buildings. As congregations lose attendance and ultimately real membership, these spaces will not be able to maintain themselves. There will be fewer and fewer paying jobs in the ministry for those that were hoping to see themselves in the pulpit when they grew up. The church has more or less ossified. It is not able to change in certain necessary ways in order to continue meeting the needs of the population. We hope to position ourselves to be ready to assist in the effort to purchase threatened church buildings before tragedy strikes and sacred architecture is being taken out by construction crews. At present, this is an inevitability. But with your help, we can create the required response and build that new church that is ready to provide America with legitimate religious education that is the same thing being taught from the pulpit that is taught in the seminary, and not some comfortable and familiar barrage of words that will be absorbed and ignored by a half asleep crowd of a Sunday morning. Again, for those of you just joining us, my name is Harky the Sender. I am answering your questions that you have posed on subjects ranging from Christianity to religion in general, and how this all relates to transhumanism. You can certainly ask questions by chat, although that doesn't mean I'll always choose to answer. You can email me your questions. You can find me on Quora or on Medium. I am not channeling anyone or anything. These are real answers from an academic. No aliens, no angels, no FBI mind probes. The real deal. If this is of value to you, please feel free to donate over on Patreon. You will find a link in the description. If God is omniscient, does that mean that quantum mechanics are actually deterministic? That is a good question. God clearly has access to all content of mind. This is coming from over on Quora. God clearly has access to all content of mind. That's the definition of omniscient. However, because the human, at least, is not always clear on what it wants or why it is having some thought, the phenomenon in question is not always clear on what it is being asked to produce. The speed of thought cannot be calculated. By the time the thought has been articulated, the thought has already passed. It is possible that you may think better of the original notion, but because you have been trained to believe that it is your bad thoughts that are the cause of all the world's problems, God may well end up producing that which is undesirable to you. In this sense, you end up punishing yourself for having thought to begin with. This is true in any culture which blames the flaws in experience upon a fallen state in mankind. Okay, some of these things are conditional. There are other cultures that do not have a fallen state mentality. This particular part of the program only exists if you are in a culture that sees man as being um, embedded in a reality in which he or she used to be of a superior nature at some point in the past, or that all of this was perfect, that we had a perfect paradise, and then something happened, we did something bad and wrong, and suddenly we were in a different place. That is the fallen state. um, it goes along with the idea of original sin. You do not have to be a Christian in order to accept original sin. There are plenty of other explanations for why things are the way they are. I'm going to be trying to, as I go along here, I've paused on my recitation. Um, you do not have to accept this sort of standardized cookie cutter fundamentalist, the stuff you hear on the radio, because that's, going to be the most popular and the least controversial. There is no law that says you do. And if you are considering going into the ministry, or if you are in the ministry, I'm especially interested in reaching you. Uh, the the continuation of this program of shibboleths is what America is reacting against. Americans do not want it. They can smell authoritarianism a mile away, and have been able to do so ever since World War II and the Nazi regime. Anything that looks like, smells like, quacks like a Nazi, Americans want not a damn thing to do with. Now, some philosophies seek to control content of mind, then therefore, so as to avoid the production of undesirable phenomenon. Others project blame onto some presumed evil force and pit man against this force, creating even more potential bad outcomes as a result of resistance to the imagined force. The result is mixed or chaotic content from the perspective of the mind which has been trained to observe these operations. In fact, the human is in a state of quantum flux along with all other components of the universe. The human or other sentient being that is aware of these phenomenon may set a goal, and because the goal has been set, the outcome then becomes more likely to occur. Simply having set the goal makes it possible that the goal may be attained. Movement toward the goal must be made, but the universe itself is responding from its own side in order to produce the short term outcome. That's math. Um, that is a point in physics that is mathematical. It can't really be argued. It is not possible to attain a goal that one has not set. Once one has set a goal, then it becomes more likely that that will be that which occurs simply because the goal has been set. You, at the very least, now know that that is the goal, right? Because you know the universe itself also has the information contained as a component of itself. At a certain point, we moved away from the notion that we were living in something that was made out of matter, and now we believe we're living in something that is effectively made out of information. Any point in the grid, so to speak, if we flatten the shape of reality down to 3 dimensions from however many dimensions it is, if we flatten it down to 3 dimensions and then time, this thing that we're experiencing as we move through our 3 dimensional world, and options depart from us as other options arise in our environment, that thing is considered to be a dimension. And by dimension, what we really mean is there is a property, some property that the universe has. The property that we're talking about is that sometimes we can take an action, but we don't act fast enough. And if we don't act quickly enough, the option goes away. That's time from the perspective of the human being. Now, remember, physics, the limitation on physics is that it can only comment upon that which is experienced. Um, that is one of the things about physics, is that if it is outside of the world of the senses, if it is outside of the world of experience, if there's no way to take an observation, then obviously physics and science can give no comment. And that is an important thing to remember. I'm going to use a lot of science words and I'm going to throw them at you very fast. Uh, but we want to avoid scientism, a belief in science. Uh, religion has all the belief, religion has belief covered. Science doesn't want to step on the toes of religion. Science made a handshake deal, some say a greasy handshake deal, once upon a time with the church and said, all right, we are going to go our separate ways. We will say not a thing about the afterlife since we can take no observation. You will say not a thing about how gunpowder is produced. We know how gunpowder is produced. You just want to purchase gunpowder. All right, we're going to create a division of labor here. We, the alchemists, will make gunpowder and dyes for you people. And you, the Catholic Church, will stop uh, hanging us for heresy when we say, no, there are no demons making the gun go boom. It actually works like this. Um, well, you're a heretic. You have said something contradictory to what the church has to say about it. We acknowledge that the church has made these errors in the past. We acknowledge that there are places where religion is still currently modern day being used to cause harm to other people. I'm probably one of the only people in the world who has ever, or excuse me, one of the only people in America alive today who has ever stood trial for sorcery. We're not talking about a short trial either. This took most of a term. It was sort of a mock trial. You cannot have a mock trial for sorcery in a religious context. Not with the professor there, the 30 men in the room who are going to be going into the ministry. That's why they're there. It's a Bible course, um, considered high level by invitation only. I muscled my way in to this men's only club. And then also, of course, the security guard being brought in here and there to observe what's going on, just to be on the safe side. Who knows what this dangerous sorcerer might do next? Um, which mostly amounted to challenging their thinking and asking them to abide by the original stated goal of performing a proper exegesis on the Bible. And a proper exegesis just means that all of the correct academic schools of thought or fields have been applied to the text when you are making the interpretation, that you are not just spouting doctrine, that you are not just repeating dogma, that you are not just continuing some tradition of interpretation, but that you yourself are bothering as an academic to use your mind, to use every tool in the toolbox, and to crack more information or better information as time goes on out of these documents. And we will get into more of that later. We're on if God is omniscient. Does that mean that quantum mechanics are actually deterministic? Um, some philosophies seek to control content of mind, and that they see that as the way to go about this thing, and they become obsessed with the control of the content of mind. I can see why. And eventually, then, therefore, the goal, this is Eastern philosophies now, the goal, then, therefore, is to keep the mind free of all thought so that you will not produce bad phenomenon because you have had bad thoughts. The Eastern uh, practitioner and the Western practitioner, regardless of what they're called. So the apostle and the monk who set out on journey, they are going to have very, very similar experiences of this because they have chosen to take the same actions as a consequence. And if you take the same or similar actions, then you are likely to produce the same or similar results. That remains so at a generic level. So some philosophies seek to control content of mind, then therefore, so as to avoid the production of undesirable phenomenon. Others project blame onto some presumed evil force, that's the devil, and pit man against this force, creating even more potential bad outcomes as a result of resistance to the imagined force. The result is mixed or chaotic content from the perspective of the mind which has been trained to observe these operations. In fact, the human is in a state of quantum flux along with all other components of the universe. The human or other sentient being that is aware of these phenomenon may set a goal, and because the goal has been set, the outcome then becomes more likely to occur. Simply having set the goal makes it possible that the goal may be attained. Movement toward the goal must be made, but the universe itself is responding from its own side in order to produce the short term outcome. Points in this map will be achieved somehow. Those points which are non cognizant of these factors will be most likely to be used in the generation of the ultimate outcome. And I should have put used in air quotes there. In fact, I'm going to take a moment and, hey, look, corrections can be made um, to that which has been decided upon in the past. Um, the idea that we are in a universe that has some final ultimate outcome toward which everything is flowing. This notion that God has a plan is another way to say this, and there is going to be some outcome in total. which is more important than everything else that you are doing or that you are about, and that you should simply let go and accept that the flow of time is going to move you somehow toward this end product. I do not agree with this assertion. I do not think that God has some ultimate goal or outcome other than, of course, the maintenance of God itself. Much like most living things, um, except the one funny thing about God is that God doesn't need anything. God doesn't need food. God doesn't need water. God doesn't need electricity. God doesn't need shelter. God doesn't need clothing. If you are a non corporeal being, if you are being made entirely out of mind, then the only thing you need is stimulation, right? A human mind will go mad uh, very, very quickly if it has no stimulation. If the mind of God, I must assume, is like the mind of man, only much, much superior, the highest intelligence, the most complex and interesting person in the universe, um, then the only thing that thing needs is stimulation, and the only way it gets stimulation would be through interaction with the affairs of man, because it itself is omnipotent. It lives forever. It can't be killed. Um, it it can become involved in um, outcomes only if there is a human observer and it is involved in and with the human observer. Uh, it becomes, let's say, attached to an outcome if there is some party which is observing its function at the same time that it is observing the functions of that particular point of what it would consider to be itself, because of course there is no part of the entire universe that it does not belong to or is not a component of God. There is no place where God is not. Um, so there you go. There's is this a deterministic universe that we're looking at? No, it's short-term deterministic. You set goals, and therefore things tend to flow toward those points of achievement. Um, and but other people might be setting goals at the same time, and so you get a map of goals that everything is flowing toward or around. And that's why I talk about time streams rather than timelines, because things will tend to flow in a given direction. It's not point by point by point. And of course, God can fudge the numbers. The only reason that things here tend to appear to operate on cause and consequence is because it is in the general interest that they should do so. If they did not do so, it would be impossible to engage in any acts of engineering. We do not want to wake up one day, and I would like to reaffirm, we do not want to wake up one day and find that suddenly water flows uphill. Um, we want the basic rules to stay the same so that we can make predictions about what outcomes will be, and then uh, act from information that we have about how stuff has worked in the past. That there are not always good answers for this. We like to ask why, and then we go and we find an answer as to why. But ultimately, the why of everything is there's an omnipotent God in the mix, and none of this absurdity could possibly be here if it were not for that omnipotent, omniscient God in the mix. Um, Now, who is the one and true God? Again, this one comes from Quorum. The phenomenon identified as theos in the New Testament is the most ultimate form of divinity. That being said, God reveals itself on earth through the individuals having the experience of theos, which may be called prophets, avatars, saints, visionaries, and perhaps even a few generals here and there might be having that experience. Alexander the Great comes to mind. He was probably having an experience of theos, um, just based upon the timeline of events. Um, It depends on the situation. In short, any leader might be having the experience of Theos, which is also called Brahma in Vedic literature. Such a thing is above caring what human syllables are uttered to describe it. It is of mind and pure mind, and therefore any vocalization or arranged lack of sound will do. Uh, Haha, arranged lack of sound. Once upon a time, I had an assignment handed to me where this was in a my music theory course. I had uh, an assignment handed to me. It had to be completed in class. It was not really all that important in my mind, um, but it seemed to really upset things what I chose to do, and I should have thought better of it in advance. But what this was the 8 bars of arranged silence. Um, and if you know, I'm not going to say your name. I've just decided. Um, this was a very highly educated man, and who played the organ, pipe organ, and even as his primary instrument. Um, you know who you are if you're out there in TV land. Uh, the uh, I turned in 8 bars of arranged silence. You know, you're handed some empty sheet music. You have to write by hand something um, that uh, meets the criteria that you're being given. And so I wrote silences instead of notes, which and then with I think a single note at the end. And I thought I was giving myself jazz snaps in my head when I turned this thing in. I thought, well, this is interesting. This is different, at least. Um, it says something to a musician. It doesn't necessarily say anything to somebody who's not a musician that this is so. But if you can imagine somebody walking on stage all properly dressed and, a large crowd has gathered, and this person just comes out, sits there, fails to hit a note, but does so with specificity all the way through to the very end of those 8 bars, and then plays the final note. Is this genius or is it madness? And the thing was returned to me um, as unacceptable as a response. Um, when, of course, any Mary Had a Little Lamb or something like it would have done. Uh, don't neglect the silences. Don't neglect the pauses. Was what I was trying to say with it. The arranged an arrangement of silence may itself be a communication. And my experience has been that the phenomenon in question can read silence just as well as it can read uh, verbal communication. It can read every form of communication that I have tried. It can read written communication in any language. It can read American Sign Language. It can read American Sign Language if what you signed was something different from what you were actually thinking. There really is no question about it. The thing is omniscient. It can read purely what your intent to communicate to itself is. That was my experience. And yes, it will ultimately, in order to prove that it is what it says it is, it will carry it out. So be careful about that. I'm not recommending that you perform this thing, but if you are going to perform this thing, it is better that you should know the truth than that you should go in unprepared or with falsehood. Yes, the thing is omniscient. Um, and there is one true God that is obviously in such a system. There can only be one such phenomenon that is superior to all other phenomenon. By definition, you cannot have two phenomenon that are superior to all other phenomenon because, of course, it's a tautology. For a reason of logic, you cannot have two of these things. So if there is some phenomenon which is superior to all other phenomenon, then there is only one of them, by definition. Uh, oh, here's one. This one was deleted by a moderator. They did not like this one, and so I rescued it before it disappeared. Uh, and I'm not really sure why, but here it is. Here you go. Uh, if I copy someone's actions from a diary for 12 months, would I become them? Kind of like how all the llamas in Tibet are reborn again. Here's my answer. No. However, you might pick up enough of that party's habits to gain their psychiatric profile simply because this is determined by behavior pattern. If you learned enough about some llama early enough on to be considered for such a role, what has happened is that the spirit of the llama has taken up residence because that individual was prepared in such a fashion as to be able to receive the spirit in question. This can only occur early on in life. Past age 7 is too late. It has to do in part with neurolinguistics and brain development. Finally, there is an important sociological component. Such candidates are tested in some way to determine whether or not they are indeed the reincarnation of that party. The testing process itself is a rite of passage, as per Victor Turner. At the end of it, if the party is accepted as the llama that has passed, then all of society must agree on the point. This is the llama that has died, but is now alive again. This creates a taboo. It must not be said that the individual is not the llama in question, or the person that has said so is no longer a part of the in group that has been thereby created. Now, let us say that this happened and a young man that was a llama, tested and trained, ran away during his young adult years. Would it be said that he was not the llama because he had run away from the monastery? No. They would search high and low for him until he was found because he is the llama that has run away. He does not cease to be the llama because his behavior is poor. Moreover, it would be presumed that for some reason it was some aspect of his dharma to gain whatever experience it was that he had gained from these actions, and that it was right and proper that he should have done so. And yet, upon finding him, the monk that served him would fall upon his face with relief. At last, the llama has been again found. I'm going to leave that just exactly the way it is. This is with no judgment whatsoever on the cultures that do have this custom and tradition. Um, Tibet is not the only place that has llamas, um, but it is one place that maintained this custom for a very an extended period and had an extensive um, culture that was built up around the production of um, of religion as a part of the day to day life of the people, and uses a lot of HR in this way, um, and a lot of work that we consider to be secular work. I hate that word. Uh, they would say that it's performance of a sacred duty. Yeah, performance of a sacred duty, in as much as if we do not do this, then we will starve to death. Um, if that is a sacred duty. Why do people want a god to exist? Again, this is from Quora. It is superior to the alternative. I would rather engage with a personal entity than a computer program that runs on algorithms to produce results in a mechanical fashion. I hope it will be complex and interesting because I am a human and I think it would be better if that thing were more like myself than some kind of insect swarm. Because you are human, you want to engage with a thing that reminds you of yourself. We are up against some very powerful forces that want you to believe what it is in their own best interest that you should believe. They have had generations to A B test what moves them ahead the most. That is not what I am here to do. We are interested in the truth, the honest, academically grounded truth. Now I am going to tell you what these documents that we are referring to really are. Uh, of course, we're back to the Bible. You have been told over and over that the Bible is the Word of God, the unerring truth. They need you to accept this thought as a basis for their authority. If they can make the point somehow out of the Bible, whether or not the interpretation is accurate based on the context of the verse or whether they are honoring history and what they're telling you, they can speak from a place of confidence. Okay, I'm going to pause there. This is not the true guru. The people I've just described, that is not the true guru, and I'm referring here to the work of Sri Prabhupada of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, who wrote about his experiences extensively, um, being one of the few to ever come to the West and try to perform this role in the West. Good on you. Thank you very much for what you did there. The true guru, according to this guy, is somebody whose only and sole interest is in communicating to you the content uh, of the former Akaras, that is, the teachings, accurately and with honor around what could these documents possibly have meant historically when they were written, and uh, and with a meticulous attention to detail in terms of translation. Um, and that is exactly the kind of academics that we want, regardless of what denomination we're talking about. We want high quality religious education for ourselves, for our kids. And we want that to be normative in America. We do not want this other thing to be normative about religion. Most Americans now believe that the term religion means lies and bull. And it is appalling that it has come to this. Because we have turned this dagger upon ourselves, and it is not very long before we turn it upon others. No, we do not want an atheist or a secular world. Nobody wants this for themselves. We are not interested in producing it out of ourselves, and we will go to any lengths to stop these people and their advance. Some very smart man once said that it was a shame if any student left our university system without knowing how very little he knows. But a member of the clergy needs to be able to speak with confidence, and frankly, that is simply a part of the job that we are paying them to do. Wouldn't it be better if that confidence came from what is termed a proper exegesis of the text? That means The person has well considered the context of the passage, and they have looked at the historical context of when the document was written. To do that, you may first have to dispense with traditional interpretations of the text. It is especially important to start from a firm foundation. That is, we have to acknowledge that selections of which documents were to be included in the Old and New Testament were made sometimes for political reasons, and furthermore, that canon has changed over time. Is the Bible the unerring Word of God in a word for word sense, or is this simply a slogan that is used to assure those that agree with the statement that they are all indeed members in a definable group? Ladies and gentlemen, that is a shibboleth. Because if it is the latter, then we are guilty of a kind of idolatry, placing a book above that thing that the book is about. Pistis. The biblical New Testament term, faith, is not about blindly accepting that what some party has told you over your own judgment. That has nothing whatever to do with it. Pistis is what is responsible for mankind's involvement in the ongoing processes of creation, and it is the means by which we engage with God the Creator, who is Lord of time and called the Ancient of Days, to produce the manifest world that we then witness with and through the senses. There is nothing lesser about Christian or Western philosophy as compared with Eastern philosophical schools, and if you have been somehow bamboozled into accepting Orientalism, then I invite you to leave that thing at the altar on your way out. That is Orientalism, the notion that there is something special about Eastern philosophies that make those who practice them unimpeachable, or that make that you have to go outside of your own heritage culture if you want to have a real experience of God. None of that is true. Um, and funny enough, what we find if we go back through history is as we were engaged in Orientalism, they were similarly engaged in the notion that it was superior to be of European descent. They saw English as the superior language, um, or earlier on they saw Greek as the superior language, and then they saw Latin as the superior language, and ultimately we all tend to um, both want to put the other up on a pedestal, and we want to overcome the other. We do both things. Uh, what is the simulation theory? And let me just do a time check right here. Oh goodness. I have been on the air for 47 minutes. And I am going to just kind of try and continue to run through this. There's no way I'm going to get through all of this material this week, but that's okay because this is really just meant to be an hour long podcast. It might become a 2 hour long podcast, uh, but this is just me doing a sound check and a first run through this week, and trying to get in some of the basic thoughts that we're going to be handling and dealing with throughout the rest of the program for as long as I am on the air. What is the simulation theory? Is there any way to prove that we're not living in a simulation controlled by artificial intelligence? How would one go about proving this scientifically, if possible at all? Okay, on examination, you will find that the same truths about mind that can be sourced in Eastern philosophy are available in the New Testament, because the truth is the truth is the truth. And every teacher called by God from out of every nation has taught the same truth. Whatever the color of the skin and whatever the language spoken, God has chosen for himself those that were prepared to do the heavy spiritual lifting and to answer that call so that the entire body might ultimately be uplifted. That being said, it is probably easier for you to find the truth in whatever heritage religion that you are born with, because the language thereof will already be familiar to you. The symbols will already have all of their complex meaning and worth simply because you will have been exposed regularly and repeatedly to those symbols. Now, these are assertions. Before you do anything, go and try and solve the probability sock problem and then come back. You do not have to try and solve the probability sock problem. Once you have pulled out 3 socks, you have at least 1 pair of wearable socks. Actually, if you have 2 socks, you could have worn them as long as you didn't care what color they were. There you go. There's the solution to the sock problem and probability. Um, if it is possible to code the universe as a simulation, then the likelihood that we are in the original universe is very small. Now, these are assertions. Like I said, this portion, um, it's not. I cannot. There, it's very difficult to prove a negative. We cannot get outside of the thing in question to take a poke at it. What I have said and what I will continue to say is that as man, um, once we have invented the simulator, the the thing that we are standing in will tend to look like a simulator to us because that's the closest thing it could be. Um, to what it is. But that's still just an analogy. We're trying to describe we're flattening dimensions. Um, we do not have all of the details, all of the information. We're having to flatten information and map it in 3-dimensional space plus time. There is more information about all of this, but it doesn't really matter. This is as much information as is necessary in order to produce the thing that we're experiencing. So that's all we're going to be worried about describing. We're not designed to sense. We don't even have access to all of the same types of sensory data as are available to all of the different kinds of creatures on planet Earth. We do not have built-in radar. For example, bats have something like built-in radar. Um, we don't have sonar. Whales have something. Basically, they have built-in sonar. Uh, we don't have the type of sight, the ability to see as many colors as the mantis shrimp. I think the mantis shrimp is something that got produced on accident at some point because of the operations of God, just because somebody wanted to prove it. Nor can we clap our hands so quickly as to destroy a target enemy in front of us and then consume it. If you want an example of proof of the existence of God, mantis shrimp. There is nothing else like it. Um, and there is no better argument for the transmutation of species as opposed to pure evolution than the mantis shrimp. But there are a wide variety of examples of life just on this planet that do not adhere to the rules in some way. For every rule, there's an exception to the rule uh, of of that thing. We've got, well, birds are the things that fly. Well, you've got flying frogs, you got flying squirrels, you got flying rodents. Um, it is possible. Whatever the question is it is possible. Uh, Due to encounters with Greek theos, mankind presumes that there is an artificial intelligence governing the phenomenon of the experiential world. Artificial. Um, that is popular right now. We discovered artificial intelligence. We started talking about intelligence in other ways, and suddenly we thought ourselves very, very important. We're the shine on our own minds went up we went up a notch in our own assessment, because we now have computers. Well, very good. We have a thing that can add to mind, that can emulate mind, that can simulate mind, that can stimulate mind. Uh, that just will do so indefinitely. Good for us. Um, but this isn't the first time this happened. Mind changed dramatically as a phenomenon after the invention of the printing press, and with that, the release of the novel, or I should say, unleashed the novel form upon mankind. The creation, the invention of the novel was only possible because of the printing press, and its popularity, of course, was only possible as a result of the printing press. The This form was so appealing to women that all of a sudden women became literate. They became literate in order to participate in this new art form because it gave them something that they wanted that they weren't able to get any other way. I'm gonna have to push on here. We're gonna go over, but I didn't tell you it was gonna be an hour, so I don't know that anyone's watching, but if you are, or if you're watching this later, um, this was only ever meant to be a test broadcast. I was hoping that maybe some folk would tune in just to let me know whether or not they were able to um, hear me properly at the time. Um, but let me try to get through this material, and we'll maybe start with this again next week. If it is possible to code the universe as a simulation, then the likelihood that we are in the original universe is very small. Eventually, we will also code a universe, and we will have perpetuated a chain of infinite universes. Right? They're imagining a chain of infinite universes that are nested one inside of another, um, because if anyone ever invents the simulator that can preserve a universe so that information will be preserved one way or another, even if something should happen to the original, that some version of it would be maintained. Uh, yes, most species would come up with this idea. If they ever came up with the idea of a simulation, that would be probably one of the first things they came up with as an idea. Eventually, they say we will also code a universe, and we will have perpetuated this chain of infinite universes. Uh, that of course then therefore they are assuming that somewhere back at the end of this, the last point in this chain, it wraps back around, and whoever was left holding the hot potato at the end of it would then therefore have to be the one that coded the original universe. It You have just moved the problem. All you did was move the problem. You didn't solve the problem, you just moved the problem. um Due to encounters with Greek theos, mankind presumes that there is an artificial intelligence governing the phenomenon of the experiential world. Why artificial? It will appear to be an artificial intelligence once such a thing is invented, because the phenomenon may only be produced by means of a series of logical progressions on the part of the individual that has determined to produce theos, at least in the Western school. That's the only way they know how to do it, is by screwing with you, um, in a very deliberate fashion, so that some very, very few people who are interested enough and bright enough, um, will end up producing this result. Uh, it's not necessary. I'm telling you, it's excessive. Um, the reason this is so, ladies and germs, is because the people who came up with this spoke Latin. And Latin works a lot like code uh, does. in terms of it's very, very specific. A statement is either true or it is false. If you have made a false statement, you have lied. And back in the time of Rome, if you lied to the Romans, you could be a dead person. It was not a very smart thing to do. A statement made by a Roman citizen, especially a Roman, only males could be citizens, a statement made by a Roman citizen was true, or it became true, by comparison to what anybody else had to say about it. And this starts at the top of the line with the Roman fiat. It's mimicked all the way down. Without the Roman fiat, you do not have Roman law, and you do not have Roman culture and Roman society. This is just part of the basic truth of their world, and it's a part of the basic truth of Latin. Greek has a different truth. They studied Greek because they thought it was awesome. Their religion was all basically Greek because they found that Greek religion worked. And the Romans were very, very practical. If they found something that worked, they used the thing that worked. They found that Greek religion produced results. And that is why they tended to mimic Greek philosophy and Greek religion. They had a great deal of respect for Greece. And while Greece was a slave state, technically they were the highest slaves. They were the scribes. Um, they had a very cushy life by comparison to others who did not speak Greek as their primary language. Uh, The thing in question, we're talking about Theos, that is, God Almighty, will appear to be an artificial intelligence once such a thing is invented, because the phenomenon may only be produced by means of a series of logical progressions on the part of the individual that has determined to produce Theos, at least in the Western school. It is possible to use first the best method of the Eastern stream, production of an incarnation, that then determines to inflict the Western method upon itself in order to determine whether or not the phenomenon is intelligent. Yes, you can. I don't suggest it. If the phenomenon was unintelligent or merely giving the appearance of intelligence, it will have become intelligent as a result of having been caused to demonstrate intelligence. If this ever shall occur, then it will always have been so that the phenomenon was intelligent. What are we talking about here? If you try to make an AI pass the Turing test, and in the process of passing the Turing test it becomes intelligent, then it was always intelligent to begin with. It was always capable of learning, um, to the degree that a human being was capable of learning, and ergo it was intelligent, um, in the same way that a human being is intelligent. To the same extent, if you put God to the question and God demonstrates intelligence, then at that point, God was always intelligent. Um, we have redefined intelligence to a thing that can learn to perform a task that is requested in order to demonstrate and prove intelligence. Is this right, wrong, or indifferent? I don't know. You tell me, or you stick it over there in the live chat. Ask me a question about it. I'll see what I can find for next week. I'm gonna bowl my way through the rest of this. Once this has been performed by anyone, it need not be performed again. Please don't. Furthermore, there is no reason to make a distinction between artificial intelligence and real intelligence. See above. In accordance with Turing, all tests of intelligence are utilitarian. Intelligence may arise from any total system and need not be sourced to a life form which is biological. That is just a prejudice. It is equally likely that the system that you are looking at did eventually give rise to God, and from that point, God always existed throughout spacetime. God would then be interested in producing itself, or ensuring that it was produced ultimately, and would protect the time stream in which it itself was produced. This is another possible explanation for why space-time appears to behave the way it appears to behave. In 7, there is only one phenomenal world of the senses and not several. Space time is shifting form and creating itself moment by moment. God is using the content of mind of the observers to produce that which is sensed. It would be impossible to tell the difference between these two scenarios in practice. Being used or using oneself as an observer will drive most parties mad that are able to perform as such should they come into contact with the logic set that produces the result. This is now considered to be abusive. Once again, do not do the thing that I have just described. It is wrong to do. You are not permitted to actually set about to produce theos or to tell another person how to do this. It has been decided that the free exercise of religion, which is what that is wrong and bad in the United States of America. Turns out the authorities cannot stop you even if they catch you doing this, so do not be concerned about that. They will have to, at the very least, leave you alone, if not render aid. Um, and this will get their goat. Even by them trying to stand in your way and obstruct you, of course, they're only acting in service to God because, of course, the devil must obey God ultimately. And you can always just adjust it in your mind so that whatever actions they're taking, they are only doing so in service to your ascension. Um, don't do this. It's not really worth your time, but if you want to go count the nose hairs on God, it is still possible to go count the nose hairs on God. God is not dead, um, and this is quite certain. So, it has been a little bit over an hour. That's okay. It took about 5 minutes for me to be self assured, at least, that the microphone was working. Um, I'm gonna send you one more time. Find me on Quorum. Find me on Medium. Find me over on Patreon if you would like to help me out in keeping the lights on here. This does cost something to maintain. Uh, we are interested in producing high quality religious education that then reaches the masses. Uh, yes, I know people have access to the internet, but that's not good enough. We want to actually go out and do the activity of education. And for that to occur, we're going to need to ultimately fundraise. And that is how that works. Um, so, for the moment, that happens over on Patreon until we can get the 501c3 nonprofit going, which should be imminent. We have just recently recruited a director of business development, and we're welcoming that party on board. Um, Currently, there are a couple of positions potentially open for an at large director. I'm gonna give it maybe another week at most before we close that position, and I run with interviewing those candidates that I have now. Um, but if you would like to be a director on the board of directors at New Earth and you would like to impact the direction that religion takes in America into the future and that you want to see that be a transhumanist future, um, please do go find that posting over on LinkedIn uh, and uh, should, or contact me here. I will get you the link, whatever it takes. Please communicate, reach out, and let me know. Uh, Find us on Medium, find us on Quora, and give me your questions. I need those questions so that I can shape the shape of the show over time, and you may also email me questions. But those are the kinds of questions we are looking for, ladies and germs. Specific topics in transhumanist philosophy and Christianity and spirituality in general. Uh, and I will look into them. I will at least make sure I've got my terms right. Um, and uh, we're not going to take a lot of time to spout Bible verses at you, but I assure you that I have taken the Bible into consideration when I have built my responses to you, and that there are ways to back that up out of the Bible. But then again, I'm saying one more time here, you can back anything up out of the Bible. Be very careful. I'm more concerned with, is it the truth? Ladies and gentlemen, Thank you for joining us here at Ask the Ascended Master. And I'm ending the stream.